Let's go to another issue. We talked about this a little bit yesterday, but it's been a feature of the state parliament today in Victoria. Victorian Premier Daniel Andrews being grilled over his contact with Lindsay Fox. This is over the proposed quarantine facility at Avalon Airport. This is quite near Geelong, a facility that is owned by Lynn Fox and expected, if these things go ahead, if the quarantine happens, that billions of dollars from taxpayers will be spent building these sorts of facilities. Now, how upfront was Daniel Andrews in all of this? Well, we'll have a look at that in a minute. Joining me to discuss it and more, Liberal MP from Victoria, Tim Smith. Let's have a listen, if we can, to the Premier in question time in the State Parliament today. Let's have a listen.
How many times has the Premier met with Lindsay Fox or any member of the Fox family at either their compound in Portsea or their residences in Melbourne over the past 6 months?
I meet with many Victorians. Well, because they invite me to meet with them, unlike so many over there who no one wants to meet with, no one wants to talk to, no one wants to vote for. What a ridiculous question.
Order. The Premier resume his seat. Order. Ask the Premier to resume his seat. The member for Kew can leave the chamber for the period of 1 hour.
I'm feeling really sick.
Order. The Premier.
Yeah, there's a lot of bluster and theatre there, Tim Smith, but basically he refused to answer the question, didn't he?
Completely refused to answer the question, Peter, and one wonders what he has to hide. I would have thought the most logical and truthful answer to the question is that I speak to Mr Fox quite regularly.
So what's the concern you've raised here about this quarantine idea to get it out of the cities? I have to say I support it, but there are concerns if public money is used to build facilities that there's appropriate transparency or probity in the letting of tenders. That's the issue, isn't it?
100%. This is not a reflection on Mr Fox. Mr Fox is an outstanding Victorian. There is a clear relationship between Mr Fox and Daniel Andrews, though, and we want to see that this process for a purpose-built quarantine station outside of the CBD of Melbourne is put to public tender with independent oversight, where it's completely beyond repute, that it's completely transparent. And I think that's what the taxpayer expects, particularly given during the first wave of coronavirus, that contract for hotel security was chucked out the door of the Department of Jobs in 6 hours for $30 million. So this government's got form with poor processes, and I think this is going to be a very big undertaking to create a new quarantine station outside of Melbourne. It's a lot of money at stake, a lot of public money at stake. It must be a transparent process, and I don't think Avalon is the only option. I've raised Point Nepean on your show before. It's a state-owned national park now that's just outside of Portsea. It was created as a quarantine station back in the 1850s. It had $40 million of investment 5 years ago, so all the electricity, all the sewage is connected. It just requires huts and other issues of accommodation to be provided for down there. So I don't think we should just be simply looking at Avalon, which is why I'm raising the issue of Point Nepean and saying there must be a transparent process as to where this quarantine station is built. Yeah, and look, I went into all the entrails of those contracts last year. There's not a lot of transparency in Victoria because the Parliament didn't sit for much of last year. You've got a Premier again who wants emergency powers right the way through to December. If it's, let's assume he gets them, he's just as likely to shut down the Parliament when it gets too tough. Federally, there's a very, very tough process to expend this sort of money. How transparent is the process in Victoria, Tim? This is a secretive state in Victoria, Peter, and you've been one of the people to shed light on this. It's a secretive state. I mean, heavens above, we're still trying to get the disclosure of the medical advice that underpinned and constituted the 5-day snap lockdown that was announced by the Premier last Friday. He won't even show Victorians that advice, and we've had contracts chucked out the door, as I said previously, for $30 million in 6 hours. He closes down Parliament at a whim, and this evening in the Parliament we're debating his attempt to extend the state of emergency until mid-December this year. I mean, let's just reflect on this. New South Wales still doesn't have a state of emergency, and they can undertake all the various things they need to do, particularly hotel quarantine, without a state of emergency. And I would like to make the point also that Daniel Andrews has said we're not having any return travellers for the foreseeable future. Why do we need a state of emergency extended then?
Why perhaps do we need billions of dollars spent on a quarantine facility? I have to say, Tim Smith,
Correct.
I get a sense Victorians are starting to wake up. Thanks for your time tonight.
Thank you.